I'll call this meeting to order. It's Tuesday, July 15th, 2025. It's 1 o'clock, and we're here to discuss the BOCC Environmental Protection Agency introduction. And I will turn it over if you just state your name.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thanks for having us here. My name is Calvin Torrada. I'm the Director of the Superfund and Emergency Management Division for EPA Region 10. EPA Region 10 covers the states of Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Alaska. And the specific profile of our division is Superfund sites, long-term federally designated sites. We have a few that are non-federally designated, which means we have special accounts, legal agreements to be able to work on those sites where companies pay into a special account, and we're able to kind of treat that cleanup project as a Superfund site, but it's not federally designated. So that's half or 2/3 of our portfolio. And the other 1/3 is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, emergency management, disaster, hazmat, oil spill response, and some counterterrorism work from the standpoint of, somebody were a domestic terrorist were to do something here, then we work with federal, local, state law enforcement, hazmat teams to then go in, deal with chemical, biological, radiological materials. And a lot of our specialization becomes cleanup, obviously. This is the kind of the nature of the work we do. And then we also have time critical removals, and that's kind of like inserting a special team going in to kind of mitigate, do short-term cleanups. Generally, those have to be done within 1 year. And we have kind of special money to be able to do that. And we work with the states and locals to be able to augment. So we have a variety of cleanup authorities and some funding associated with that. And that's our, kind of essentially our portfolio and our bread and butter job. From EPA standpoint, we are the smallest region of people and resources to cover the largest geographic area in the United States. And Bunker Hill, where you all are here, the Bunker Hill Superfund site, is a great example of what we call a mega site. And we, are offering bantering back and forth with our East Coast counterparts. And we say, that's really a Superfund site, and it's a few square blocks, right, in New Jersey or whatnot. And how about, encompassing like maybe 3 or 4 year states, and or you actually have to take the airplane to get to. And we always joke about that. But so from size and scale and the complexity and history and whatnot, working on a Bunker Hill Superfund site, for example, is a good kind of really a premier showcase of the work we do, especially after four decades. Right, 1983 is when the National Contingency Plan. So that is the list, the Superfund list, or the National Priorities List is the official list that the site was listed on to create the Superfund site, and so for 42 years. The team that are here now, as well as many generations of team that came before us, have been working on this site, taking a legacy problem and trying to make it better. And we've been working hard at it. And Ed is a great example. He knows everybody in town, so as long as we're traveling with Ed, it's great. He serves as a tour guide and great places to eat. But talk about somebody who has been in the community a long time, working really on our collective behalf, right? Not just EPA, but really being an ambassador of what we can do, working with the state and local government, as well as non-profits, to be able to make a bad situation better. And clearly, with people coming into town, it's great to be able to see people able to recreate safely, right?
Exactly.
Because we want to prevent children, families, others that might be more susceptible from being exposed to heavy metals or other contamination that's been, from a legacy activity. The balance of that is that we know that mining still exists here, and so how is it that we can, maintain the jobs that we do? I know there was a lot of rhetoric back in the day about, EPA coming in and shutting down industry. But we know and we realize that, everything has to live in balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, how do we continue to do that, but doing it safely in a manner that, we're not working against others' expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a hard thing to do, but it's great. I think it's these types of dialogue and
Mm-hmm.
relationships that gives us the ability to talk through tough issues and come up with, what makes sense, right? What makes sense for the community? How do you get that input? And then, be able to make a decision so that we can keep work moving forward, because that's what the taxpayers asked us to do.
Yeah.
So again, thank you very much for giving us
Oh,
the
I appreciate
opportunity.
it. Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things is Bunker Hill's reopening,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys are aware of that and helping them
Mhm.
do that, and that's a good example that that we're still mining and still pushing forward, and yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
So what questions do you have? We came prepared. Maybe talk about
Okay.
the site history of the
Yeah.
site, but we have a lot of expertise here. So
Yeah.
we are here at your disposal. We can talk about anything that you'd like to related to the Superfund program, the site itself, or the
Yeah, I
kinds of
think-
work we do.
Yeah.
or-
Yeah. I think for our area, just kind of do an overview of what you've done and what you're continuing to do, and
Okay.
just
And what your plans
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, with your permission, if I can turn it to Ed and the rest of the team,
are. Okay.
we brought some handouts, so we can walk
Okay.
you through kind of
Perfect.
Okay.
our planning strategy and what's been done. And I think
And we can leave an electronic version of this presentation
Oh.
for y'all to disseminate
Okay.
after the fact.
Okay.
if you
Okay.
like.
Perfect. Thank you.
I don't know if Commissioner Dose would need a copy. He's pretty intimately familiar, but make sure that he gets a handout.
Do you want to hold on to this?
Sure.
So maybe I'll just take it from there, Calvin, if you don't mind. So I'm Ed Marine. I've worked on this site. I've worked for EPA since 2003. I actually came to the Silver Valley to work with the Corps of Engineers to clean up the mess left at the Bunker Hill smelter by Gulf Chemical and by Gulf Resources, excuse me. And since that time, I really was fascinated by the work, and so I continued to do that work, and then had the opportunity to come to EPA in 2003 and continue working on the Bunker Hill site. So I lived in Coeur d'Alene for 22 years during that time span. And I think we've achieved remarkable achievement, just improvement in the environment here. As the thing that you witness is the hillsides in Kellogg. And I know people that have been around for a while realize that those hillsides were a moonscape. And when I came here in '95, but that's just like the thing you see that's visible, right? A lot of the work is invisible. I know you worked on the yards for a long time. Seeing those yard improvements, for us, seeing the blood lead levels drop down to almost what you see at a national average is a remarkable achievement. And we continue to work at that, right? There are still times when we see high blood leads and we want to understand what's happening that triggers those things. And so the work that continues to go on spans large geographic area, but it also spans a broad aspect of not only cleaning up the site, but identifying where exposures are occurring, and then what can we do about that, right? As you know, the lower basin is a huge expansive area. Most of that is not in Shoshone County, but South Fork feeds Shoshone County, or goes through Shoshone County and feeds the lower basin. So we do have work going on in the lower basin, and that's a place where people recreate from every county and every state, probably, right? And so that's something that we are really focusing on now, but we're also trying to get to source areas, and we're working hard at that in the upper canyons right outside of Wallace. You've probably been up Nine Mile Canyon recently and seeing the remarkable transformation there up at the Dayrock Mine, as an example, right? And if you continue on up the East Fork of 9 Mile, you will realize that all of the major mine sites up there have now been remediated. A major milestone that was just completed last year. So we're working on the upper basin source sites because those are continuing to pull downstream by Mother Nature. We continue to do yards as we get access from the owners. We have a lot of distant owners that don't respond anymore. We call them ghost owners. And they're not a person. A lot of times they're corporations, so you don't have an address that you can find these people. But we also look to continue or look to continue to get those yards that we have now been able to remediate. And we're also focusing on the lower basin, as well as achieving major water quality improvements in the Bunker Hill box with the central treatment plant upgrade and the groundwater collection system that was just completed less than 5 years ago. And we're seeing just incredible water quality improvement aspects in the South Fork of the Coeur d'Alene River from that work. And I hear fishing is quite good in the South Fork. We couldn't say that 20 years ago.
No.
And there were no fish 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great indicator of just how successful the program is being. But that's an invisible aspect. You can catch fish, but people don't necessarily realize what went into improving the water quality and cutting off those high levels of zinc from the largest zinc loader into the South Fork. So it's a big dynamic program, and it continues to move forward from many aspects, and we will continue to do that on to the future. So with that, I think what might make sense, if Eric, if you're prepared, I'd like to turn this over to Eric, and we can flip through these paper slides and kind of talk through it. And I've already touched on a couple of these points, but I think we can look at these pictures and maybe have a little bit more discussion and dialogue as we move forward.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just to introduce myself, my name is Eric Nikolai. I'm a EPA remedial project manager. I've been with EPA for about 3 years now. Before that, some experience working for Washington State and then also in the private sector, just doing different remediation work and cleanup. So also tying that with some habitat restoration. And so as we kind of dive into this, a lot of that kind of combined into these projects that we're working in the lower basin. So definitely excited to dive in, but just to give you guys a little bit additional history and information about the site. The first page shows kind of a general boundary map of the overall Superfund site. And as we've been kind of referencing, there's different areas that we've been labeling as like lower basin, the box, and upper basin. So to explain a little bit more, when the site was first formed and listed, we had to break it up into smaller geographical locations. So the box was like the first one, and that's operable units 1 and 2. So 1 is the populated areas where those residential houses were, and then OU2 is the non-populated, so where like the smelter complex and those more industrial facilities were. And then as the site developed and we started to prepare other decision documents and record the remedies that need to be in place, we started to expand that, and then we have operable unit 3, which was really expanded out from that box, and that includes upper basin and then lower basin. So that's all of OU3 that really captures the larger portions of the site. And so from here it stretches all the way on the east side from the Montana border, all the way across the Panhandle and into Washington State as well, when it carries from the water in Coeur d'Alene Lake to the Spokane River. So that's how all three, well, mainly Idaho and Washington are involved with the site.
Okay.
So that's a little bit on the geographic location. And then as we kind of touched on like the history, a lot of this just stems from the historic mine operations and the historic mine waste disposal practices that were used. And then that photo just really shows how at the Morning Mill, they just had a sluice line that discharged their mine waste directly into the South Fork and just let nature carry it on downstream from there. And because of that, and over time with the flooding events, it really carried those finer metals that are in the sediments and just get transported downstream. And then as they get carried down into floodplains, they'll eventually deposit as the water levels lower and leave those kind of spread out on a much larger scale across those floodplains, the wetlands, the lateral lakes, and then even eventually down to Lake Coeur d'Alene. So definitely a large geographic area, about 1,500 acres, and then it covers about 166 river miles. So that's why we definitely say that this is one of the largest and most complex Superfund sites in the country. So yeah, here's just a list of some of the contaminants of concern that we're dealing with, primarily lead, arsenic, cadmium, and zinc. So those are the 4 primaries, but we have some others like copper, silver, and mercury that are also prevalent on the site and that we're working through the different media like soil, sediment, groundwater, and surface water. But one of the main topics that always comes up is the health effects of lead and how that directly impacts the human body, specifically for children. So there's a lot of different impacts on the development, especially with their cognitive development and just other impacts that it can have over time. So I won't go into too many of the details there, but Panhandle Health District has been a huge advocate for promoting that education and just really helping the community know of the impacts and just the ways to mitigate that. So this graph here just shows how those blood levels have changed over the last 50 years. Once these kind of parameters were really starting to be measured. 1974 was one of the beginning points of monitoring blood levels in children, because that's when there was a large fire at the smelter. There's a bag house that was used as kind of pollution control. And during that fire, about 50% or so of those bag house filters were destroyed, but the operations of the smelter continued. So with less of the pollution controls in place, large emissions continued and deposited across the Silver Valley. And so there's a huge contamination and exposure control there. And so as you can see, like, it really spiked at one of like the nation's largest levels of blood levels for children at about nearly 70 micrograms per deciliter. And over time, just all the different cleanup actions that have been taking place with reducing exposure and the closure of the smelter, the cleanups of yards, and just other cleanups over time, we've been able to bring that down below the Center of Disease Control, the CDC. They have a reference value, and that is the average level across the country. And we've been able to bring that down below that level. So a huge milestone, as Ed was alluding to earlier, to bring it down to one of the highest levels in the country, down to below average. And then we also just have a graphic here just showing the overall Superfund process. And Calvin had mentioned that this site was first listed in 1983, and there's been a series of steps that have gotten to where we are today. Starting off with some remedial investigations to really assess what the problem is, the feasibility study, which addresses how are we going to go about this, and what's the best way to clean it up. And then once we determine what's feasible, we have a record of decision saying, okay, here's our cleanup actions and how we can move forward. We document that, and then we implement that in what's called the remedial design and remedial action phases, where we know, okay, here's the remedy we need to do, and here's how we're gonna clean up the projects. And then once those cleanup projects are done, we move it into long-term monitoring and see how effective that is. And if there are things that need to be readdressed, if there's still some kind of source in place, we will come back and address that, so that way there are no more exposures and that the cleanup is complete. So yeah, just to highlight some of the significant progress that's been made. A lot of these have been kind of touched on with just the overall reduction of the sources at these mine and mill sites, starting in the BOCC and OU2, where like the Bunker Hill smelter was, and then also now working upstream where we've started in Canyon Creek and 9 Mile, really addressing those large mine and mill sites that were contributing contaminants into our water streams that feed down into the South Fork and eventually into the main stem of the Coeur d'Alene River. And then that upgrade to the central treatment plant that I was mentioning, that captures all that groundwater that was passing underneath that central impoundment area, the CIA there in Kellogg. And that was a huge milestone, because by putting in that collection system, we're extracting the water before it reaches the South Fork, putting it through the treatment system, and then discharging clean water. And we've been seeing reductions in like zinc and cadmium, for example, about 80 to 88% reductions. So huge reductions in the amount of metal loading that's going into the river. And then some other examples of projects that we're doing in the lower basin are creating clean habitat for waterfowl by doing agriculture to wetland conversions. And I have a few examples of some other projects, but here you can just kind of see it before and after, what those agricultural fields that have been operating as a farm or agricultural purposes for over 100 years, and now restoring it back to the original landscape of a functioning wetland. So we also have a map showing the upper basin, which is predominantly for Shoshone County. And so I think this will be high importance just for our discussion today, and just the focuses in those two main watersheds for 9 Mile Creek Basin and then Canyon Creek Basin. And so first I'll talk about 9 Mile and just mention that this work had started in about 2013 with all the priority actions being completed. So in the beginning, we went through an investigation of all those mine and mill sites that were up in that canyon and addressed which ones are the highest priority, which ones, based off of the data, are shown to be a highest contributor. And then we ranked those based off of priority. And now, as of last year in 2024, we completed cleanups of those priority sites. And we're going to continue our long-term effectiveness monitoring, see if that's making the impact that we're expecting for the watershed and the overall water quality and ecological receptors, to really see how they're responding. And then if everything looks good, that's great. We're going to continue monitoring. But if there's ever any indication that there's still a source in place, we can go back and reassess. And maybe those lower priority ones would be needing cleanup or some other reason to go back up there. So that's definitely on our list to keep an eye on. And then in this area, there was a waste consolidation area that a lot of those removal projects had the waste rock taken from the site and then placed in this waste consolidation area. And that's what's being currently wrapped up with a final clean cover cap and a liner system. So that way there's engineered design on how the waste consolidation area is operated, and ensuring that water is not infiltrating into the waste rock, but instead it's going into a drainage system. That way it's taken off site quickly before it can really collect that contaminant. And so, yeah, just in the neighboring watershed next door is the Canyon Creek Basin. And now that we've addressed everything in 9 Mile, we're shifting a lot of our focus into Canyon Creek and starting with those high priorities. And the top one that's under construction right now is the Star Complex. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the largest in the area. And you can just see on this map how many more mine and mill sites that were located up in this. And because of that rich mining history, especially focused around the historical town of Burke, and just how tight that canyon is, it just makes for a very complex and interesting work environment just to work in that single road. And there's a lot of residents that live up in there. And so a lot of coordination to try and address those highest contamination sources, but also make sure that we're respectfully working around those residents that are there and trying to limit the impacts as much as possible, which is always a challenge, but I know that there's been a lot of great communication there. And so similarly to 9 Mile Creek, we have another area in the Canyon Creek Basin that is also operating as a waste consolidation area and a repository for all the mine waste that's being removed from these sites and then consolidated in place, and having an engineered system and cap there to make sure that that's safely being monitored and that the waste is staying in place. Just one thing to highlight for the Star Complex that is actually starting next week because of the nature of that area with working near like the mine sites. A lot of these have adit tunnels and discharge tunnels that have acid mine drainage. And so we have a process that we've been working through for the last 2 years just to ensure that there's no potential release of any kind of adit drainage. And so what we're doing now is putting essentially like a conveyance piping to capture that adit drainage and then directly move it downstream, so that way it's not in that particular work zone. So that piece of work is actually happening next week, and going through the whole process of notifying just everybody that's listed on the call sheet and just making sure that everybody's aware of the work and just going through that process. So I guess I'll pause real quick, make sure if there's any questions on the upper basin. I know it's a very quick overview. A lot more information we can dive into, but before I move on to lower basin, which I know is predominantly like Kootenai County, just want to pause for a moment and see if you guys have any questions.
Now, I just have a quick question on the Star Complex. Are they putting part of the creek underground?
There is a box culvert that they've put in place, and it's actually completed. I believe as last year, most of that box culvert was put in place because there was a very small existing culvert that was there, and it was undersized. And so now this was properly sized for storm events, and so that will run underneath Burke Canyon Road. I'm trying to remember the exact information on that. Bonnie Arthur is our project manager working on that one.
Okay.
So
It's just primarily replacing a culvert that was there.
Okay.
But we're not looking to put the creek into an underground culvert
Okay.
for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I had a question the other day. A citizen asked me that because they saw some of the work up there.
okay, yeah.
So, you mentioned earlier just, coordinating with mining companies. And I will tell you that that's actually Hecla's property up there. We've coordinated very closely with them on that. And we continue to coordinate with Hecla on an annual basis with our works where it may overlap or come adjacent to any of their properties. So that's an ongoing interaction we do with Hecla. You also mentioned Bunker Hill Mining Company. Obviously, we're working very closely with them, and as you probably know, we received or achieved a settlement with them several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're definitely working with them. The water that comes out of the mine is still being treated by a plant owned by the government, so that's a big deal, and that water is going to continue to come out of the mine. So we do have a vested interest in making sure that things are going to continue on a good basis there, and they can continue their mining operation, but we want to make sure that water's taken care of in an appropriate fashion. So.
Okay.
So one thing to mention with a lot of this work, so EPA is working directly with the Coeur d'Alene Work Trust, which was created in 2011 from the Asarco settlement. And when we talk about a lot of this work, so they're working up in the upper basin, also lower basin simultaneously. And we have to balance that work between those two different work areas and work within an annual budget of $30 million a year. And so I just wanted to highlight that as we're working through these different projects and balancing that. And that way we could also ensure the longevity of that trust fund to make sure that we have the funds needed for all these cleanups. So before I kind of dive into that, I just wanted to introduce the concept of the Coeur d'Alene Trust and how we're working with them.
One point of clarification is the Coeur d'Alene Trust funds cannot be used in the Bunker Hill box. That settlement is specifically for work in operable Unit 3, the area outside of the box.
So what consists of that, the Bunker Hill Trust? Was that just funds that came from?
Those are settlement funds that came from the Asarco bankruptcy settlement.
Okay.
And that's all it is.
Now, and I've heard that they just use the interest on a lot of it, or is there a?
It is invested for returns, conservatively to protect it, but so far it has been actually making money.
Okay.
The long-term projection is it's going to be bankrupt before we get all the cleanup done.
Okay.
There's a lot of work that lays out in front of us, but
Okay.
a lot of work yet to come in the lower basin that's not been determined yet.
That's right. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just for our reference also, just to mention like the overall start of that trust is about 243 million, and now we're over 600 million. So just to show the amount of growth that's been happening there and sustaining that through the interest. So that's been great. And so now to highlight the lower basin. So essentially that lower basin starts on that very west end of the box, right at the confluence near Kingston. And so when we're talking the lower basin, it's essentially that point all the way downstream to the Coeur d'Alene Lake. And the lake itself is not within the lower basin project when we're talking of what we're working on. Is primarily the riverbeds, the banks, and the wetlands and the lateral lakes. And so some of those, now that we're starting to really shift downstream as we're addressing those upstream sources, we have the downstream priority projects that we're working on, and we're essentially implementing a series of different pilot projects. So that way we understand, okay, this is something at a smaller scale that we can understand how effective it is, and if it's really going to work at a larger scale, when we can implement it rather than just a pilot, we can move into a fuller operation. And so some of the examples are the Cataldo Reach riverbanks. And essentially that's looking at a lot of the riverbanks that are sloughing off, eroding away, that we're seeing at a higher rate than ever, just with measurements that we're doing with these erosion pins that are about 3 feet long and then installed into the side of the riverbanks. And we're seeing in some areas where those entire rods are just completely eroded away. So it just really shows how much of that riverbank is sloughing off and then going into the river and being transported downstream. And then as a result of that, in other particular areas in the riverbed, we have a scour hole. This is in the Dudley Reach. And this is one of the areas that's been identified in the riverbed as the highest lead loader of contamination that's being contributed from the riverbed and going downstream, contributing to the amount of lead into the lake. And so this is one of the big areas that we're focusing on, getting into the river for the first time, doing potential dredge and capping to see how effective it is in about a half-mile stretch of river, and determining what is effective and what we can do essentially in about 36 more river miles, and what's going to be sustainable there. And then some other examples we have, as we mentioned, in agriculture to wetland conversion projects, and one of the big ones is Gray's Meadow. And this is nearly complete as of this year. And this was to remediate and restore former agricultural land into about 700 acres of clean wetland habitat. So it took two different areas of the fields there. We have Cave Lake wetland on the east side of Black Lake, and then we have Lamb Peak wetland on the west side. And essentially together that's about 700 acres, and that'll be complete by the end of this year, and hopefully have good vegetation growing. And now we just have to tell the tundra swans and other waterfowl start going to the clean areas and not going to the dirty areas. So that's always the hard part. We need a big billboard or something. And so that's only one of those ag to wetland conversions. We have others coming up that we're currently working on in the design phase, and just have those in the pipeline to really move forward in the next few years. And then shifting gears into another program that we're working on is the recreational sites program. And that's really focused on reducing exposure and providing safe areas for people to recreate. And that covers all kinds of different areas, whether it's being out on the beach, along the river if they want to recreate there, ATV trails, hiking trails, anywhere that we really find high use of recreation. We're trying to provide areas that are clean for them. And also in some areas, if it's not feasible to provide like a clean material, we'll have to use other access controls, whether it's hard rock to keep people from maybe pulling their boats up in certain areas, or hostile vegetation. So we're looking at a bunch of different avenues there, including educational outreach, posting signs, and just different information that we can help really spread the word that everybody is aware of. And with the Citizen Community Coordinating Council, the CCC, we've had a few different meetings lined up, and we've had other recreational groups actually partake. And there was recently a kayaking group that was really interested and participated. And so it's just those kind of avenues that we're really trying to find those people and groups of organizations that come out here and might not have that knowledge and information about the history, and not know that this is a contaminated site, even though how beautiful it is, but there are still posed risks if they're not recreating safely.
Yeah.
And then also just want to highlight that we're doing waterfowl monitoring. So as a part of these restoration projects, by providing that habitat, we're also monitoring like tundra swans and wood ducks to see how their exposure is when they're coming in, because during the spring they'll migrate from California as they're headed up towards Alaska. And when they're spending their time here in the basin, we're trying to understand where are they going, what are they feeding on, and how can we understand that more to incorporate into our cleanup projects. And then I got a little table here showing our amazing team of all the remedial project managers we have involved, our section manager, and some other support from attorneys and community involvement coordinators. So we've got a big group working on this, but everybody gets a good chance to be out here and communicate with all our different partners and just really be involved as best we can. So yeah, you'll see us at Basin Commission meetings and other site projects, so definitely trying to get a lot of time out here. Just also want to highlight some of the different ways that we interact with our partners and just the different agencies that are involved. And so just starting at the top, we have our federal, state, and like local agencies that we work with the state, Fish and Game, DEQ, so yeah, Department of Environmental Quality, and then also Department of Water Resources, and then Panhandle Health District when we're focusing on those human health aspects. We have the Basin Commission, and those quarterly meetings. And then since this does overlap with some parts of the site in Washington, we do have the Department of Ecology involved. And then other federal agencies like the U.S. Geological Survey, Fish and Wildlife Service, the Forest Service, and Bureau of Land Management. And then working with federally recognized tribes, the Coeur d'Alene tribe is very heavily involved and works closely with us on our projects. And then community, we have a variety of different groups there, especially in the communities, just those direct cities that we work closely with. And then the responsible parties, so those are the ones that we are identified during those bankruptcies and had settlements to fund all this work. And that was the creation of the Coeur d'Alene Work Trust. Then we also have separate ones with the Bunker Hill Mine Corporation and Stauffer Management. So a variety there that we're still actively working with. And then here's just a chart showing the breakdown for the Basin Environmental Improvement Project Commission. As mentioned, is the Basin Commission, and how that involves the 3 different counties involved, so Kootenai, Shoshone, and Benewah. And we have the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, State of Idaho, State of Washington, and then federal government, which we have our EPA regional administrator sit in as the representative for that, and Calvin sits in as the alternate. And then that Basin Commission is structured with executive director, and the executive director oversees that Citizen Coordinating Council and the technical leadership group. And then I won't bore everybody too much with all the variety of funds and just get all to the weeds on the different accounts that we have. But we do have different ones specific for different areas. As Ed was talking about, we have funds specifically for the BOCC, like Operable Unit 1 and 2, because that's where we're focusing the funds on those areas, because the work trust is only allowed to be spent in OU3. So we're trying to designate those other funds in those areas that can't utilize the work trust. And then other settlements with state of Idaho, and they have other state appropriated funds for work that they also do with institutional controls and other projects within the BOCC, and then fund that Basin Commission executive director position. So yeah, any other questions regarding those? I know I kind of hit them at a high level. Okay. And then, yeah, just added my last piece on here, just announcing that this is the time of year where we're doing our 6th 5-year review. So a 5-year review is something that's required for Superfund sites once you start the cleanup project. And so this is the 6th one after all this time. And essentially what it does is evaluates all the work that's been completed so far across all the different operable units that we've incorporated into the site. We looked at how they've been implemented and the performance of them, and see if there's any kind of recommendations that need to be made, or are there any issues. So we really tried to identify that there. That way the next 5 years we can redirect as needed or have a different priority. And we also try to incorporate the public input. So we have that period right now from July 1st to August 31st. And Rafi's our contact to be in there. So we put out a few different press releases and just trying to spread that word and put out mailers. So essentially this 5-year review will be completed by next September of 2026. So it's a bit of a process. It's a long document just to prepare and make sure that we capture all the great work that's been done. But yeah, all those other previous 5-year reviews are also available on our website if you guys are interested in checking those out.
Okay.
So yeah, I appreciate the time just to go at a very high level on just this background and information. We can get you the digital file to share, but just want to see if there's anything that you guys wanted us to highlight on or go into more detail.
No, I think
you've done a great
yeah,
job. Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think Rafi may have some community involvement perspective.
Yeah, I guess just to close this out, my name's Rafi Ronquillo, and my title is Community Involvement Coordinator. I'm out of our Public Affairs office. And community involvement is, fortunately, it's built into the Superfund lifecycle. So it's actually written into the same law that dictates what we do in the Superfund world. And so community involvement happens at every stage of a site's life cycle. In this case, as Eric mentioned, we're in the 6th 5-year review cycle, so it's a long time to clean up. And the thing about when you have a site that has a long history is that in certain areas demographics change, and so we're trying to do our best to serve as an interface for the community here, the different communities in the Silver Valley, and kind of take stock of those changes and try and learn ways to reach out to people in the most appropriate manner. So one way in which we're doing that is we're putting forth what's called a community involvement plan, which is a site-specific document that each Superfund site across the country has. And it's kind of a snapshot of the communities that comprise the site itself. So who lives in this area, where do the background demographics about this area, are there certain languages spoken in this area that we need to account for, things of that nature. And as part of that, we've done a series of interviews with really anyone that we can find who would like to talk to us or has interest in the site. And we've tried to note certain trends through those interviews about how people receive information, what questions they have, what are conceptions about the site, or in some cases misconceptions about the cleanup. So we have a lot of mechanisms that we try and do our best to capture the public sentiment about the site and also understand how we can do better outreach. So that's kind of our shop and what we do. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have other regular periodicals that we publish. One of them is the Basin Bulletin, which is a kind of newsletter that we publish 3 times a year. We're going to publish one coming out in July. And we work closely with our counterparts in Panhandle Health, in the Health District, and also IDEQ to kind of get updates about what's going on in their sectors of the cleanup, to try and give people a streamlined document that they can read, understand a little bit about what's going on, and then touch back in they can stay up to date with it without too much effort is the goal. We also go to public events to do outreach and table. We're going to be at the North Idaho Fair in August, so looking forward to that.
Okay.
And yeah, I think I'll leave it there, not to take up more time, but it's important to us and it's an important part of our work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One sign of the times is that we are publishing the last paper copy of the Basin Bulletin, and now it's only going to be in electronic format. So there are a few people I know in the Silver Valley that don't necessarily ascribe to electronic means, but it's a time that we have to now leave that medium behind. We'll still continue to publish it. It'll just be in electronic format going forward after this last publication in this month, July.
Yeah, I think this will be. So, yeah.
At the August, so next month's Basin Commission meeting, you probably heard that there's a public tour, and that's an annual tour where we pick a particular area and load people on buses and drive out to the site and have our experts talk about it. So it's a great way to actually see some of the work if you haven't seen it already, and you get to see and meet the other members of the kind of the multi-agency team that we have. So if you do have time, I know Commissioner Dosu usually attends, but if you're interested, please join him and look forward to seeing you there.
And when's that again?
It's
August 27th.
August
27th?
Yeah.
And this one is going to be up 9 Mile Creek, so you're going to be able to see all of the amazing work that's been completed, and things are in the restorative stage with vegetation growing and water flowing back in the channel and not having to flow through mine waste anymore. It's a beautiful site.
Okay.
And it's open to the public.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And what time is that?
10 a.m. I should know.
We can send that to you.
You could do that.
There's an invite that was sent out via email, so I'll make sure that we'll get that over to you since we have your emails.
Okay. Yeah, and then maybe we can just put it on our schedule, put it on our agenda, and go out there.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any further questions?
No.
No? Public?
Yeah, there's rumors out there you guys are going to lower the lead levels from 1,000 parts per million for cleanup down to 500 or 100. Any of that true?
There was a national lead policy reviewed and then approved last year that actually dropped those levels. In areas like this, they're site specific. And so, there's a national policy, but our job was to evaluate whether those policies actually meet, the local conditions. And so my understanding is that the team was kind of looking at them. But with the current administration, they're actually looking at that national policy again. And so we've been asked to kind of hold our implementation if we had anything, but we were kind of, because of the size and scale of what we do and how we do it, it takes us time to be able to do that. So it actually fits within our time frame of, since we're evaluating it and they asked us to pause, we're just going to stay, doing what we do right here. And then if changes are made, then we'll try to figure out how to implement it.
So it could be lowered here.
I doubt it. I think one of the challenges, the lower you go, the more expensive it gets, and it just becomes more difficult. And I think we've proven by targeting certain levels, be able to drive down. There is a cost benefit, right, that we all have to weigh as part of reality. And I think the work that's been done here historically has tried to, obviously with that graph, tried to hit that mark the best we can to be able to protect as many people as we can, but also be able to ensure that those dollars are utilized in the highest threat areas. The upper reaches, obviously in the water now in the lower basin, all of those are the areas where we really need to concentrate those funds. So we're balancing all that out. So there's nothing we implemented yet.
Nothing that because I had people ask me if your yards that were under 1,000 are now going to come back and get forced to clean up again.
No. So at this point in time,
At this point in time.
So just for a point of clarification, the national standard was 400 and is 400 until the recent guidance came out last year. And as you well know, we are well above that because of our site-specific data. So we're not rushing off to reduce the cleanup levels, but we do need to take a hard look at this new guidance and our site-specific data. I think the one thing that would really help is the more community members that get blood lead tested, the more robust data set we have, the more we can point to the fact that our cleanup levels are really successful. And there is, they can get tested anytime by Panhandle Health District, but there is also a drive coming up in August to get blood lead testing. Specific dates we can get you on that. It's coming up in the Basin Bulletin, I know, but that is something to just kind of share with your community members is go get your kid blood tested.
Yeah, especially the new families that are here, right? They may not understand the history because everything looks pristine, right? And they weren't part of that history. And so, but understanding that history and where they get airdropped in the time span, and to be able to make sure that their kids are protected is critical. So that we can continue to gauge as these 5-year reviews and other, we can look at the overall performance of where we're trying to drive to, right? And the bottom line is if we don't protect the kids, we're not hitting the mark, right? Because they are the next generation. We want them to be here and these communities to thrive. So that's where we need everybody's help to be able to share that information and encourage families to go out there. And as Ed said, that that's a common question I ask in the Basin Commission: what can we do more to protect these families? But if we don't know what's happening, right, with them, then it makes it hard for us to be able to ensure that we're doing all the things that we need to do.
Okay.
Last one.
Yeah.
Tiger shaft discharge tunnel. I would imagine that's caved in.
Yes,
The portal.
it is.
Chad, what have you? I mean, I live, where I live below it. What's in the safety plan here to keep this from Colorado blowout?
Well, it's been fully, evaluated and looked at, and I think we do have a plan in place if something should happen. We do have basically flow controls if there is some sort of blowout that's beyond our capacity. They do have standby tanks and pumps ready as well.
I've seen them going up.
Yeah.
So is there any estimate on the volume of water that's going to be released?
I don't have it off the top of my head, Matt. Honestly, I don't carry that number. But I think in addition to that, we do have a call down list, and that obviously any community leader would be called if something were to happen. They're going to treat it very carefully. You can know that.
Well,
so
in Colorado, they matter.
Yeah.
So it's been fully thought through. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Appreciate the question. It's a good question.
All right. Well, hey, thank you guys. I
Yeah,
really
thank
appreciate you
you.
coming, and
Yeah.
Well,
thank
nice
you.
to meet you.
Nice
and
to meet you.
Yes,
we'll
nice
have,
to meet
we'll have to
you.
do this again. Maybe
Yes,
next year.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Provide more updates on
Yeah.
all the
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting.
appreciate it.
it.
Thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.